I'm Trilety. I think I know everyone. This is some of my art. First, I want to thank MoonRise and Megan and Mom for giving me the opportunity to show, because I've shown for like 15 years in group exhibits, but this is my first solo show. I don't have an academic background in art beyond photography classes in high school and college, but I grew up making art. And my mom, Barbie, was always making art when I was a kid. She was often doing really detailed pen and inks and detailed needlepoint. And so she would set me up beside her with a similar project like painting or latch hook. And so I was always doing art with her, and I'd actually taken up latch hook recently, and Doug, my bestie, has an original latch hook piece based on a drawing he did of Batman and Robin. So that's kind of fun. And so I continued to do a lot of art as a kid, and like Mom said, which I didn't know you were going to say that, it mostly focused on God. And it was very in the lines, and it was like the church and the altar and God and everything. And I'm no longer a practicing Catholic, but I bring that up because I think Catholicism has had actually a lot of influence on my art. Because as a kid, I was always entranced by the mysticism and the flesh that is in Catholicism, and Catholicism is a really body-oriented religion. And I even had done, it's not as overt now, like you look at this and you're like, there's nothing Catholic about it. But I had done some overt pieces, it could be. A piece I did years ago was a painting on an ironing board, and it was in the composition of Michelangelo's Pieta, but instead of Christ, Mary was holding an oversized flaccid penis. And it was all about basically like the burden of women being submissive to men, and that is what we're taught in the church. And the people I see nodding were raised in the church, so I know Jen like. And so that's always, but I still, it was really lovely and kind of fantastical, because I do still respect my upbringing. It's just not a part of me, but it is interesting to see how much, especially like the body-oriented stuff, like the flesh, comes out, and the kind of visceral nature of Catholicism. So I really appreciate that. But I did start coloring outside of the lines after that. So not being trained in art, I used to work mainly in watercolor because the paints last a really long time, they're really inexpensive. You do them on paper, which is less expensive than canvas, and I think not being trained, I always used to think like, I'm not a real artist, so I'm not worthy of canvas pieces, so I wouldn't paint on them. I do have 2 canvas pieces in this show, except I did not purchase them new. This canvas piece was the original painting on it was one of Jim's, and he didn't really like it anymore, so he said I could paint over it. And there's one remnant left. If you look at it, there's a little heart by the girl's hand, and that was the center of one of Jim's flowers. And then the other painting was another piece that Jim had that he didn't want anymore, and so I got to paint over that. So I'm kind of breaking out. I still haven't purchased a new canvas ever to paint on. And let's see. So a theme of my practice is to reuse materials, not buy new. So I've been trying to do that as much as I can. I've been trying to paint with, I use a lot of Jim's old acrylics. I haven't bought paint in probably 15 years. And so I use his old acrylics, I use my old watercolors, and I've been getting into putting latex wall paint. Like this has latex over acrylic, and the bird has latex over acrylic, and a couple of these pieces have latex house paint. Other things I reuse besides that is I like to paint on old board, whether it's like old shelves, or Jim will bring home plywood scrap for me and I paint on it. There's also a piece down there under the light that is on an old kitchen cutting board of ours. So I try and reuse things like that. I also do a lot of embroidery, so I use leftover scraps of my embroidery floss, and you'll see that in a few of these. Like here to attach the watercolor to the mat, and then here in this piece and a few others. The thing that I really love to reuse lately is wire from an old Hammond organ that Jim brought home and disassembled. And you'll see these are the wires from the Hammond organ, the ones over there in the bird, and some others. We split the wires between us. I did nothing. I did not disassemble it. I was just like, those are pretty cool. So Jim split them into 2 piles, and he still has his whole pile, which is in the art room, and I covet it. I look at it, and I'm like, oh, there's still so much wire left that's not mine. A theme of my art beyond like the kind of like Catholic color and body and flesh is the space of anticipation. I'm always been really interested in how full and thick empty space between two forms can be. And it's really pulsing and erotic, even though it's technically empty. So you can see that with like, there's kind of a space here, there's a space like here with these hands and the ties, the spaces in between the finger and the firefly, the finger and the bird down there. I just think it's really cool because it has this like anticipation. You don't know what direction something's going. Like with this piece, you can't tell if they are about ready to grasp the stem or if they've already been gripping the stem and letting it go. You kind of can't tell what's happening. So I like that. That's the theme of my art. Near the end of last year, I started a new process, and I only have 2 of these pieces. It's this one, and then this one over here to go back to my doodling roots, where I take board. That's an old face front to a shelf, painted in latex. Then I take multicolored Sharpies and do drawing and doodle on it. And then I take lacquer, clear spray paint lacquer, and I do a really drippy sort of spray on it so it distorts and blurs the images. So it's new, and but I figure if you stay with me in a couple years, it'll be refined and looking really cool. And yeah, and lastly, when I was trying to figure out what I was going to talk about, I asked Jim, I was like, oh, what did you talk about at your solo art show in your art talk? And he said, I stood up and I pointed to my art and I said, this is what's in my head, thank you. And I'm not that clever or succinct, but that's kind of what's happening up here. I did forget to say in the beginning, kudos to Megan, and I think Mom helped too to hang the show. I just came and dropped off all my work and was like, don't know how you're gonna do this. So I think it looks really, really good, and I think it elevates my art the way that it is put up here. So that's it. I don't know if I sped through it and I did 3 minutes or I did 10 minutes, but thank you all for coming. It means the world to me.